Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Autism Stories. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Autistic people are the true experts of the autistic experience, and Autism Stories is where we interview autistic people to learn from their stories, experiences, and get their insights. If you would like to be notified about each week's episode of Autism Stories, we suggest you subscribe on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'd also appreciate it if you could give us a positive rating and review, as it will help others to learn about autism stories. On today's episode, Syntyche Jennings joins us to discuss the first online game that is a social network and career platform. We hope you enjoy today's conversation. Syntyche, thanks so much for joining me here on Autism Stories.
Thank you so much, Doug. Happy to be here.
I'm very happy for you to be here. And I'd love to start out by learning, where does your story in the autistic community begin?
Sure. So I guess I can take it a little bit back to when my own daughters were diagnosed. I have not been diagnosed. So currently, I have a 15-year-old and I have an 11-year-old, and they were both diagnosed. And this caused me to kind of wonder a few things, especially with some of the behaviors that I saw from them that looked much like my own in my own childhood, and some of the things that came up when they were attending public school that I went through, which happened to be just kind of hiding out in the bathroom. I was one of those kids who my thing, I found relaxation through just using like water. I'm always attracted to water. I still am. If I vacation, it's near water. So I would be one of those kiddos in the bathroom, like if it's too overwhelming, if it's too loud, I'll just be in there with the light off with my hands under the water. And I never thought that this was, related to anything. I would always have to kind of sit somewhere where the lights weren't shining directly overhead over my desk. And I would definitely kind of sit away from everyone in, really loud areas. And I always used to wonder, like, I just don't, I just don't like, certain things about the whole environment. But at the same time, my interests were very specific. And I I couldn't quite wrap my head around the way that everybody seemed to just kind of stand around and like they're engaged in conversations, and the whole the school element, the way that things are supposed to be, the way that you see things on the, like you might see a school and everybody's just kind of standing around in the hallways and talking and everything, and I was the kiddo looking for somewhere to basically have some quiet time, or and I recognize that in my own daughters. And a lot of the things that kind of pushed me in that direction was, the phone calls from parents who kind of knew me and actually had their diagnosis a little bit later in life, and who had kiddos who were diagnosed as well. So that kind of pushed me to say, you know what, I'm just going to go and take a look at, what this might look like on this side of things, because I could identify there. So when I did, I guess when I wasn't expecting anything, because definitely 38 years old and now I'm 40. I'm like, it's been a while, but when I went, it was first seen as depression. And, I was like, well, I don't feel depressed. And that's quite often one of the diagnoses that you get, depression. I'm like, well, that's not, that's not exactly how I feel. But then I went to a couple of others that, knew what things look like, especially for Black women. It just reveals itself differently. It certainly does. And they were able to pinpoint that these are the things that we classify, especially with your intersectionality and everything else that you're bringing. And I was diagnosed, and it made me happy and relieved, because the whole time I was trying to relate to my own kids because I saw myself through them, and I was like, wow, how did, I kept wondering, how did I even get through those years? You start to wonder because, when the being a parent, you look at that and you're like, wow, you're having such a tough time. But, a lot of things that I pretty much dealt with, I had to, what do they call it? Just, what do they call it? Suck it up and move forward. And it made it quite difficult. So that's where my story began. And I can't say that it didn't begin before that because I was always attracted to people like me. I've been working in the field of just working with people like me for about 22 years now. And I think it's always been an attraction of mine. So that's where it began, and that's where I am. And long story short.
It's always, when we learn about our autism later in life, it's always interesting to me because, like, looking back at our school experiences and, when lunch would happen, I would often go to the bathroom and realize that just to get away from all of the chaos and all of the sensory stuff. And remember masking in class just so I wouldn't be called upon by the teacher and things like that. So it's just so fascinating to kind of like look back on those experiences.
Oh yeah, completely identify there. Yeah, the bathroom was the place to go. I've definitely learned to know my limits, and that's the beauty of being able to finally know. And I know, and this doesn't discount anyone who's self-diagnosed, because I think that is hugely important to actually, if you're able to say that, self-diagnose, and that is where you're at, that is exactly where you're at. No one else can tell you anything differently, and they shouldn't, because these are our experiences. But just having that, it helped me to identify areas where I need to know where I need to step back and take a break and go back and say, hey, I'm feeling this way. I need to, put myself over here for a bit, it's beautiful to be able to do that. It's relieving, and it's a lot of relief to be able to do that.
Now, when I'm preparing to interview people here on Autism Stories, when I come across people that have PhDs, I'm fascinated to want to learn about those experiences because I got nowhere close to a PhD. So earlier this year, you got your PhD in business management. So I'm wondering, why was getting your PhD in business management kind of the right path for you?
So one of the things that, I guess, for me, I wasn't going to get my PhD. I really wasn't. This was a choice that took about 2 years to make, and that was while I was still completing my master's. I kept trying to figure out whether I wanted to continue, what are the, pros and cons. I would go to these, networking events and talk to other PhDs to, figure out what, things might have looked on the other side. And just, and at one point I was like, nope, not going to do it, not worth it. And I can't, alongside that, I can't say it's been an easy journey. It hasn't. And I know a lot of, college interested individuals might not say this, but there's a lot of times I had to, take a break. There's a lot of times I just didn't complete a class because I was burned out. There were times that I needed to repeat a class because I just couldn't I couldn't keep up with it. I just want to say that is completely normal, especially for anyone who is for anyone basically, and especially give yourself some grace if you are neurodivergent, because this isn't easy. It really isn't. And a lot of people just won't say that, yeah, I totally bombed that class. But I picked myself up and I just kept going because I knew that I could do it. It's just not on the time frame that everybody else is. So having that in mind, I really wanted my PhD to be meaningful if I was going to do it. I had just finished my master's in industrial organizational psychology, which has to do with every spectrum of workplace psychology, workplace behaviors, and just anything that happens in the workplace. And I wanted it to expand. So I had some knowledge of business, but I didn't have the knowledge that would put me into the way that I should see things globally, cross culturally, being able to look at different international ways to make people work best together. So I wanted to merge that. And I thought it was important to look at global business in that light because I think that the way that things are going, we're no longer a one, we're a blend of pretty much anything that you can think of in the workplace. It's a blend. And I think that sometimes what happens is in other parts of the world, there's this very one-dimensional viewpoint that everybody's the same, same religion, same background, culture, same mindset, same just generalities, too much of that. And I wanted to take myself out of the element of generalizing what I knew about the workplace and push myself forward. So what I've been able to do is just understand that people, no matter who they are, we're all motivated by being able to have some autonomy, and that autonomy is super important in the world, and it's that autonomy is super important in the workplace for people to be able to be who they are while doing what they love. And that is one of the things that really pushed me to look at global business as my next step after IO psychology.
Autonomy is one of my favorite words, and I feel like it's like built into my DNA. So I'm always thinking about creating a culture of trust, building that autonomy with my team at Autism Personal Coach. So, with your background and knowledge about business management, what do you think are some of the most kind of critical things entrepreneurs and managers can do in helping to develop that trust, in giving that autonomy to their team?
One of the things that I think is super important to kind of look at is being able to identify in a way that you would see someone and ask yourself, how could you promote psychological safety from their viewpoint? There's so many diverse perspectives and backgrounds, as we just talked about. One of the biggest things that I always hear, based on just different points of research, is that when voices are not heard, that is where we lose trust. That is where we lose concern. That's where we lose that freedom, and that autonomy is lost. So making sure that you're hearing everyone's voice. And if you have a specific bias, first off, recognizing that bias is super important. Sometimes we don't get approached to say, hey, what biases are you holding? Sometimes that is part of our work internally that we need to work on. And as an IO psychologist, that's one of the things that I always present to a lot of leaders and a lot of employees, to kind of draw out those biases so that we are able to ensure that all voices are heard around us, because they're easy to drown out when we're not open to hearing that voice. So increasing psychological safety, that communication, respect, inclusivity, creating that culture of trust and respect. We have to hear those voices. And in order to do that, we have to knock down those bias, that barrier.
Currently, you're doing something that I'm very interested in that you're the head of gamified psychometrics at Future State University, which is the first online game that is a social network and career platform. Can you tell our listeners how this game might be helpful to them in terms of their current or future employment?
Future State University, it is a 3D multiplayer generative AI platform. And its goal is to create a environment that everyone can participate in. And it while it is considered ed tech, we're most more so focused on blending education with accessibility and skill building and making it fun. It's gamified. So one of the things that we sought out to do is just make sure that everyone's able to gain skills that they need while not basically boring them to death. And one of the things that I love about Future State University is we work on skills based on executive functioning. And these are simulated gameplay situations that we created to work on different areas of executive functioning. Inside of that first person moment, you'll see an environment, and you might be in a workplace or outside, and a player runs up to you and says, hey, we have a deadline approaching, we need to do this. And in that moment, your behaviors that you are being trained to work on, you're going to be able to perform those within the gameplay, and you'll get a immediate access to what you could have done better and how to enhance those skills, whether it's delegation, whether it's time management, communication, technology, all of those things that are important. One of the amazing things that we've kind of sought to do is to match those needed skills back to whatever area of interest you might be interested in. So if you tell the generative AI that you're interested in becoming let's see, maybe a softball coach, or maybe even being a lawyer, maybe even in between, you might want to be a nurse. You might even want to be a artist. It's going to pull out all of those skills from one of our databases that is particularly needed for those areas that you would like to do, and tell you what skills to work on, so that those simulated situations inside of the environment are presented to you, and you can continually work on your EF, executive functioning profile. And that includes job readiness skills. I can't tell you how many times that when I approach to universities and talk to them, that one of the hugest things, and also the employers too, one of the most huge things that they see missing in college graduates is job readiness skills. It's huge. And that's one of the things that we sought to give to our players. And we call them players, but they're also job seekers or upskilling, whatever you want to call it, on our platform environment. But just giving them those opportunities to build that within a gamified environment, what we're seeking to do is translate all of those things that they're doing within that gameplay into what it might look like as an employee for any potential employer. And the value there is that employers get to see exactly how they are measuring up and what progress that they're making, and that player is able to as well, which I think is beautiful.
So, one of the things I was interested in about Future State University is that the game can help companies develop diverse teams. So, when you think about diverse teams, where do you see the importance of that diversity to allow companies and organizations to really grow and thrive? Because I don't see how, like, for example, our team at Autism Personal Coach, if we didn't have a diverse team, I don't see how we would still be in existence today.
Oh yeah, super important. So one of the things that we were looking at when we formed Future State University is that we also have an effect on the companies that are approaching to who are looking at our players or candidates in a way that they're looking at skills, and they're also looking at what's important to their organization. One of the most important things that we put into Future State University is that employers will be able to come on and look at where they needed to update their culture. And we have what we call a culture mechanism that we're building out. In fact, that is going to be able to gauge where they are and where they want to be. And this is based on lots of different tools that we've looked at. And we found a very great tool that we can do that within gameplay. So, of course, companies, when they're coming on to Future State University, they'll get their own island, which is truly, magnificent. They'll be able to build out their island. And that island itself will tell players exactly what type of culture that particular workplace has. And on the internal side of things, that company will have been working on parts of their culture, their leadership. We call it the Constitution for leaders, their own beliefs, and also their employee beliefs, and how all of that meshes together. Because I myself and everyone else is a big believer that if we have different interests when we're working inside of a company, they have to all align back to its mission. While being different, they have to align back to the mission. And that makes everyone focused on that particular mission rather than looking at, well, who looks like me, who acts like me, things like that, that really does take away from diversity within teams. So that is a brief overview of what we're creating, but definitely something that I think organizations will benefit from as they are able to kind of look at their organization within the islands of Future State University and make some key decisions to diversify their teams further.
Now, from my understanding, you have a passion for AI, and I've used a few different AI programs that I think have certainly been helpful to me from an executive functioning perspective, which results in me having to use less energy to complete certain tasks. So, are there some aspects of AI that you think can be particularly helpful to autistic and neurodivergent people to reduce the overwhelm that we might feel doing certain tasks?
What's interesting is, as a researcher, I do a lot of my work out of AI now. I remember days that I would, as I was studying, um, I would have to pour through Google Scholar and just go through different databases to get, different things that I needed as far as research. And one of the tips that I would give to especially autistic people, I love the fact that I'm very curious. And if there's a topic that I want to know about, I will go down a rabbit hole and down that rabbit hole just to get to, and then, emerge on the other side. And I've been using things like Elicit. Elicit is a AI that is used for researchers, different colleges, and it is a quick way to get peer-reviewed information without feeling overwhelmed to get into that activity itself. It's a quick way to do something you love to do without having to go down so many avenues within the internet. And I love that I'm able to just grab things very quickly that way. AI has made it easier to quickly form some sort of responses. One of the things that I love about GPT and also Claude, which I won't bore you on LLMs, large language models, but those they refine them so much that they can pick up on emotion. And the funny thing is, I was like, there's no way. So, I was one of those people when AI just, came on the scene, I was like, yeah, this is a problem. But I've seen so many things happen, especially with the whole way that I can go into ChatGPT and plug in something someone might have said inside of an email, and it will tell me what the whole like the whole tone for that might have been. And that is something that is big for me. And of course, it's not completely correct all the time. But that's something big for me because sometimes I don't pick up on certain phrases. I don't pick up on certain meanings, especially when I'm not, able to hear a voice. If I can hear someone's voice, I can pick up on, inflection, all of those things. But, you know, just being able to use it that way, it's super helpful to kind of feel confident when I'm responding to emails, even, and even responding in a situation where I'm not sure what the whole meaning of the message was. And that's one of the things about my autism that I sometimes like, well, I'm just going to ask that question because I will completely go further than it needs to be when it's just a simple question. So that's another way that I found. So I guess research, being able to respond to written messages, pulling out whatever tone might have been there. Those are two ways that I found most useful for me. And of course, there are others, but those are the ones that stand out for me. Um, Especially from being able to communicate, especially time management, things like that. I think it's helped me significantly.
And lastly, how can our listeners learn about you and Future State University beyond this interview?
Sure. I'm always happy to connect with anyone through LinkedIn. I'm not big on any other social media. I don't really use it, but I do use LinkedIn. So Syntyche Jennings on LinkedIn, and also Future State University, the website, futurestateuniversity.com is the easy way to kind of come in and check things out, see how things are going. And we are a startup, so any feedback is amazing.
Well, Syntyche, thanks so much for joining me. I really loved our conversation.
Thank you so much, Doug.
Thanks so much for Syntyche for the conversation. To learn more about Syntyche and Future State University, please check out the link in the podcast description for this episode. Did you know Autism Personal Coach provides neurodiversity affirming support by autistics for autistics? We empower autistic adults and teens to lead self-directed, purpose-driven lives through our customized life coaching and community groups. Our distinct approach prioritizes each client's unique goals and preferences, fostering a sense of agency and promoting self-advocacy. Our coaches work collaboratively with clients to develop personalized strategies and tools that can help with executive functioning, emotional regulation, relationship building, stress management, and much more. We also support parents and partners of autistic people by providing insights and guidance to bridge communication gaps and nurture mutual understanding. With our accessible remote services, individuals from any location can receive the assistance and mentoring they need. Join us today to experience judgment-free coaching rooted in empathy, expertise, and respect for autistic identity. Until next time, I'm Doug Bletcher of Autism Personal Coach. Talk to you then.